Hello and welcome to this tutorial. This is going to show us how to make a decal. For this example I'm going to use a body side number for a locomotive. This will take you through all the processes you need. Making the texture in Photoshop and then making an object for that texture in Blender, exporting it into the blueprint editor which in turn puts it into the game, and then from there editing the config file of an actual locomotive to get it into the right place where it's visible. So first of all we need to start with a new texture. Now you'll see it's set to 512 by 256. In general, with all the textures it has to be a power of 2 for both dimensions. It's just a mathematical thing to do with how the game and the computer interprets it. So our next size up would be 1024 and 2048 and so on. You don't want to get above 4096 if you know what's good for you. So because we're doing a body side text object, fairly small, 512 by 256 is fine. So click OK. And for this, first of all we're going to pick a colour which is what I call off-white, 90% of grey basically. So pick that and then flood that into the front. This will actually form our texture. I know what you're thinking, there's no text there, but all will become clear in how we get nice sharp text objects without having to mess around with the texture too much. So if you go to your text tool, and you'll notice I have two fonts here, British Rail, dark normal regular and light normal regular. So using dark normal regular and set to strong, on left hand justified, click somewhere on the left and we'll type in 56311. So there we are. Now we don't really want it any bigger than this, because if we wanted to use the same decal for another number we've got a bit of extra space. Because for argument's sake, if you want to size it up you should really use 3, and you'll see from there that it's a bit excessive. So we select all the text, just change down your size till you're about happy. There you are. Okay, and then if we position that into there, and that sits in the middle nicely as we select. So we were going to, we'll centre just, no, we'll leave it left justified, go on to the end and put in 1, 1. Now first thing you note with that means it moves it off centre, so again just get your adjustment. Now by having the view snapped to document bounds, that's what makes it basically highlight when I'm in the centre vertically and horizontally. Always a useful tool. Now that the text is down the size we want, we're going to select the text. So do load the selection of the transparency of 56311. Okay, and in the channels tab we're going to hit create save selection as a channel. This will make our alpha channel. Now as you can see, once we take the text away, which we are going to do, on the top layer we just have white, but the alpha channel, so the section that's white is what will be shown and all the sections red is what will not be shown, and that's how you use the alpha channel to get a nice crisp texture instead of doing it on the texture layer. So that is our texture done. We just need to save it. Now you see I've already got it set up in the Railworks source, which is where you put anything you make, your own provider folder, then class 56 decals, and then a texture folder. So we'll save that, put it as compressed, and that's done. So now we'll move over to Blender for our shape. This is a standard Blender start project. If you bring up N, this gives us our transform and grease pencil tools, etc. A lot of basic stuff that helps us navigate around. First job, just press the delete key and delete that cube. Now if we press 5 to get rid of the perspective on the view, and then press keypad 3, this will give us our side on view, which is where obviously the number on the side of a loco would go. Now we need to add a plane from the mesh menu. Plane. Now the studio, you will notice that it is lying down. So press 3 again. We need to rotate it along the Y axis in order to get it standing upright by 90 degrees, which we've done there. Now switching back to Photoshop for a moment, if we load the transparency again, now you'll see here it says we have a width of 401 and a height of 125. This is kind of the shape size we're looking for, although really we had a full width. So now if you recall, we have our size here, but we actually, when we had a different number, we wanted it to be full width, which was 512. So rather than it being 401 over 125, actually realistically we want to calculate 512 over 125, which is 4.096. And then we will do the inverse function of that. Keep your calculator open. We'll switch back to Blender. So if we're going to say, for example, first of all press Ctrl and A, apply your rotation. So Y is our width. So if we're going to say this number object is 0.8 meters wide, what we need to do now is multiply this number by 0.8 to get what our height will be, which is 0.1953. So type in Z 0.1593 and then 0.1953. So this is our basic shape. If we pull this up a bit, move that to be our UV image editor, this is how you texture objects, by using the UV image editor. So we will now open from our source file where we saved it a moment ago, our texture, which is there. Now by pressing tab we switch to the object edit mode, press U to unwrap the object into the texture, and I use project from view bounds for a nice textured one, a simple shape, and there we are. Now what we need to do is use scale and the Y axis to bring in the height only down to where our object is. Now if you press F, you will actually make that full screen, and another shortcut, shift and space in any window, makes that the main window, and press F for full screen. So that we can see we've actually got a bit of overlap here, so we need to do our S and Y and peg it back just a little bit to about there. Press shift and space again, and then F, and that shows us our full texture. And you'll notice this is actually previewing our texture with the alpha channel enabled, which shows us how the game will interpret it. Press tab to come back to object mode, and now that we've set that out, just pull your side pane out a little bit more, and on this second row of tools we need to go to the materials tab and create a new material. It does not matter about the name for this material, and on the tab next to that is textures. Press new. Our first slot needs to be the name of the shader that the game will use, which is traindecal.fx. This is what you use for all decals that you want to put on the side of a train object. And our second one, press new again, but this time we already have the image. It's our main texture that we are using. Once that is done, we save our project inside the source folder, class 50, my name, class 56 decals, and then 56311 blend, and that's done. At this stage it is important to note that for exporting you need to have a train simulator exporter for Blender. I will put a link for this in the description for the video, and hopefully also I will be able to include any other links for software that you need. And once you have this installed, you go to your user preferences, and this is where all the add-ons for Blender can be found. And if you go to import export, scroll down, and you'll find here IA model, IGS model. These two are the ones that will be installed for train simulator shapes, and the IGS is the one you need for shapes. IA is regarding to animated objects, which is something I've not got involved in. So we'll go back to our 3D view, and we can then go file export to TS20XX IGS file. Give it the same name and export. We now need to convert the texture into something that Train Simulator's Blueprint Editor understands. So I use RWA's tool. Again, I'll try and give you a link. You just pick the texture we made, which we're using in Blender, double click it, make sure it generates bitmaps and compress, click convert, and that's done. Next up is Blueprint Editor, and you'll see I've already got it open ready. In source, M. Wilson class 56 decals, and here is the shape we made, the IGS. Now it's important that from that import export plugin that you install, that you have these two text files in the directory of any object that you want to actually make. It will not export the IGS shape file properly without these two text files. So and you will also have this log file. If for some reason you don't have an IGS, the log file should contain information on why, basically what is wrong with your object. There's basically a problem as to why it couldn't build it. So you right click on the IGS, do create scenery blueprint, give it a name of say 56311 underscore number. This is what will appear in the object browser list, and then I always put them under miscellaneous. Make sure it's valid in scenarios so you can test it in a scenario to check that it shows up. But before we do that, in order to check it shows up, we press F8 and it will export a test object and load up a version of Train Simulator World just to show you what your object looks like. So here we are in the Train Simulator environment. As you can see, we've even got our little Steam login, and down here directly below us should be our decal somewhere, and there we are. When we click on it, because there's no train in front of it, it's not showing up properly, but you can see that is what our object looks like because it's showing us the alpha. That there is actually a little preview of the style of glitching you get if you use an object bigger than required for the texture, which is why we always try and make the object shape similar to the shape of the texture that is active that we are actually using. So that means our object has worked. Hooray! So we can close the preview and press F7, which now actually generates our object, as you can see here, into Railworks assets, following the path of your source directory, and makes your decal. So that is the next phase done. The last phase now that needs to be done is to actually make it work within Train Simulator on a train. So you need to go to your assets directory and obviously pick a train. In this case it's going to be RSC class 56 into here. So I've got the config file, and there we are. So it gives us the no driver and the driver version, and obviously if you wanted to have both for 56311's decal, you'd need to do the same for each. So we're going to right click and copy and then paste, and we're going to call it 56311. Now we go into here, and the first thing we need to do, upon our RW tools, is to change the name where it appears. So if you highlight and copy it, then we'll use the search and replace tool, which is Control F. Paste it into there, and we're going to replace it with class 56.3.11, just like that. If you do replace all, and every instance that it had of that, it is then changing, which is just that one and that one. But sometimes there can be more further down in the config file. The next thing we need to do is make a child object entry. But before we do that, what we want to do is actually put the config file for our child object inside the class 56 folder directory. This just means we don't have to do the provider ticking for our decal. So go to your provider name, class 56 decals, just the config file 56.3.11.bin, right click and copy, and then go to our engine folder and paste it into there. Next we need to find a child object entry, because I always duplicate one that's already in. So we want one without any rotation and scaling, so this one's perfect. It's 1, 4 zeros, 1, 4 zeros, 1. All this stuff controls rotation and scaling at the same time, calculated through trigonometry, horrendously complicated, which is why we don't want one of those child objects for placing down as. We're just going to duplicate this, so we come to the end here where you've got this /c entity. That basically means it's the end of the child object entry. Go on up to the top, and then that will go to where it starts with the C entity without the slash, and copy. And for ease of finding it, in case we put an error, we'll pop it right at the bottom of all the child object entries, which is the /children. Go a line up to the /C entity container blueprint, Control and paste. So we've just duplicated that, but what we first of all need to do is name it appropriate to what we're putting in, which is 56.3.11 number, and then the directory, which of course was in, if we go back to here, you'll find it, and you can click in your address bar. The RSC and class 56 will be fine in there, but this bit is the bit that's different. Paste in the folders, and the name of the XML file is 56.3.11. The game automatically reads bin files and makes some XML files, so we don't need to do that. Like I said, in the child object entry, this should always be 1, lots of zeros, 1, 4 more zeros and a 1. That means we're not scaling it, we're not rotating it from the object we actually made. However, these three numbers here are very important. This one here, which is currently 0, defines the width from the left or right hand side of the body, and obviously we have a decal we want to sit on the outside, so if we put it at 0 and it's sat on the middle line of the body, we're not going to see it. So we're going to put it at 1.4. That's just a bit wider than I know locos are, so that hopefully it will show up in front of it straight away. This second number here controls the height of our child object, so put about 1.5 meters, and this last one, 0, controls the length along the main object that it will appear, so you know, towards the front or the rear cab. So if you put 5 meters, it'll be towards the one cab. We will now save this config file, and off we go. Now that we have done that, it should mean that we are ready to actually go into Train Simulator, load it up, put the train, which is specifically called 56, class 56.3.11, into the world, and it should show up as the default class 56 because we've not made any text changes, but it should have the child object on the side, just as a proof of the whole theory working. So I'm going to pause while we wait for TS to boot up and go into the real world. Okay, so after taking a good amount of time, here we are. We're in the scenario on Academy where I test sorts of things. So as you can see, we've got 87019, which I'm working on. Lots of lovely child objects there for you to have a good look at. So we're going to test putting down 56311 and hopefully seeing it come up with the decal on the side. So go to your asset list. We need to come down to RSC and check that we have the class 56 pack RF sectors ticked, and then when we come over to our side here, we should be able to find it fairly easily in amongst everything else I've got ticked. And there it is, 56311. Place that down in the world. Now it's not shown at the moment, which I hope means it's one of two things. Either the decal is backwards facing and I've got it facing into the train, or it's on the other side. There's your answer. It's on the other side. So there you have it. 56311 decal is sat there. Now what you can see is that it's actually pretty much sat right on the side of the body. So we got a good guess with that